The morning light on Cathara was dim and gray. Commander Sithel stood at the window of the defense center, watching the sky with tired eyes. 3 months ago, the sky had been blue and bright. Now it looked sick and weak. The Zephyrian ships blocked the sun like dark clouds that never moved. Sithel's crystalline skin, once a beautiful pale blue, had turned dull from stress. The Velthari were a peaceful people. They had never learned to fight. They had never needed to learn. For 1,000 years they had lived in peace, on their quiet world, growing their crystal gardens and sharing their knowledge with anyone who asked for it. But the Zephyrians did not want knowledge. They wanted the planet. They wanted the rare crystals that grew deep in Cathara's mountains, crystals that could power their war machines for 100 years. Commander, a voice called behind him. Sithel turned to see Lieutenant Kethmer approaching. The young officer's crystal formations were cracked from worry. The last supply ship, it's gone. Sithel closed his eyes. He had been expecting this news, but it still hurt like a physical blow. How many survivors? None, sir. The Zephyrians destroyed it completely. They sent a message afterward, laughing about it. The commander walked to his desk and sat down heavily. On the screen in front of him, numbers told a terrible story. Food supplies 3 weeks remaining. Medicine 1 week. Energy reserves 5 days. The blockade was working exactly as the Zephyrians had planned. Sir, what about the other worlds? Haven't any of them responded to our calls for help? Sithel shook his head. Sadly, the Altarian Council sent their regrets. They say they cannot risk war with the Zephyrian Dominion. The Rigel Federation says the same thing. Everyone is afraid. It was true. For 2 months Sithel had sent messages across the galaxy begging for help. The responses were always the same: sorry, but no. The Zephyrian Dominion was too powerful, too dangerous. No one wanted to make them angry. Outside the capital city, once it had been beautiful. The Velthari built their homes from living crystal that grew and changed with their moods. When they were happy, the buildings glowed with warm light. When they were sad, the light dimmed. Now the city was almost completely dark. In the streets below, Sithel could see lines of people waiting for food. The portions got smaller every day. Yesterday, riots had broken out near the main food center. His people, who had never raised their voices in anger, were fighting each other for scraps. The worst part was the children. Velthari children were born with tiny crystal buds that grew larger as they aged, but without proper nutrition the buds stopped growing. Some had even started to crack and fall off. If that continued, the children would die. Commander, incoming transmission from the Zephyrian fleet. Sithel sighed. Put it through. The screen filled with the ugly face of Admiral Krexter. The Zephyrian leader was a massive creature with gray-green skin and too many teeth. His small red eyes gleamed with cruel amusement. Good morning, crystal creatures, Krexter said, his voice like grinding metal. How are you feeling today? Hungry, tired, ready to surrender yet? You know our answer, Admiral, Sithel replied, trying to keep his voice steady. We will not give you our world. Krexter laughed. Sound like breaking glass. Oh, but you will. You just need more encouragement. Today we destroyed your last supply ship. Tomorrow maybe we destroy your power stations. The day after that, your water treatment plants. How long do you think your people will support you when they start dying of Thirst, they will never support you. We shall see. You have 24 hours to reconsider. After that we start bombing your cities, not to destroy them completely, you understand, just enough to make your people scream, just enough to make them beg you to surrender. The transmission ended. Sithel stared at the blank screen for a long moment. Around him, his officers waited quietly. They all knew what this meant. Tomorrow the dying would really begin. Sir, Lieutenant Kethmer said quietly. Should we consider their terms? Sithel looked at the young officer. Kethmer was barely an adult, his crystal formation still small and delicate. He had a mate and a newborn child in the city below. Of course he was thinking of surrender. What are their terms again, Lieutenant? Complete surrender of the planet, all Velthari to be relocated to work camps on Zephyrian mining worlds, our crystal gardens to be strip mined until nothing remains. And how long do Velthari typically live in Zephyrian work camps? Kethmer's light dimmed. The reports say 6 months, maybe 8 if they're lucky. So surrender means death. Fighting means death. At least if we fight, we die as free people on our own world. The room fell silent. Everyone knew the commander was right. The Zephyrians didn't want prisoners or slaves. They wanted the planet empty so they could tear it apart without anyone watching. Sithel walked back to the window. In the distance he could see the mountain ranges where the great crystal forests grew. His ancestors had tended those forests for 1,000 years. Each crystal was grown with love and care, shaped by song and patience. The Zephyrians would destroy it all in a matter of months. Commander, another officer called from across the room. The communication array is still functional. Should we send another distress call? Sithel almost said no. They had sent hundreds of distress calls. Every major world in the galaxy had heard their plea. None had answered with anything but empty words of sympathy. But then he thought of the children in the city below, the children whose crystal buds were cracking and falling away. Maybe somewhere in the vast galaxy there was someone who still cared about innocent life, someone who wasn't afraid of the Zephyrians. Yes, he said finally, send one more message, broadcasted on all frequencies, emergency and standard. Let the whole galaxy hear it. The communications officer nodded and began working at his console. After a few minutes he looked up. Ready, sir. Sithel walked to the transmitter. He thought carefully about what to say. This might be the last message Cathara ever sent to the galaxy. It should be honest. It should be true. This is Commander Sithel of the Velthari Defense Force on Cathara. He began. We are dying. The Zephyrian Dominion has blockaded our world for 3 months. Our people are starving. Our children are sick. Tomorrow they will begin bombing our cities. He paused, looking out at his darkened world. We have asked for help from every major power in the galaxy. All have refused. We understand. The Zephyrians are strong and we are weak. No one wants to risk war for a small world like ours. His voice grew quieter, sadder. But if there is anyone out there who still believes that innocent life has value, if there is anyone who thinks that bullies should not be allowed to destroy entire worlds just because they can, we are here. We are dying and we need help. He took a deep breath. This is Cathara. Anyone who can hear this, please. The transmission ended. The room was quiet except for the soft humming of the equipment. Outside, the Zephyrian ships continued their slow circle around the planet like vultures waiting for something to die. Sithel knew no one would come, but at least he had tried. At least the galaxy would know that the Velthari had not given up without a fight. He did not know that his message was traveling through subspace toward the edge of known space where something had been listening and waiting for exactly this kind of call. 3 days passed after Sithel's message went into space. 3 days of watching his people grow weaker and more desperate. The Zephyrians had begun their bombing, but not the cities yet. They started with the crystal farms outside the capital, destroying centuries of careful growth in minutes. Each explosion sent shock waves through the crystalline structures that made up Velthari civilization. The living crystals that formed there. Buildings began to crack and dim. The planet itself seemed to be dying, along with its people. Admiral Krexter was enjoying himself. He had moved his command ship closer to the planet so he could watch the destruction through his viewports. The Zephyrian admiral was known throughout the galaxy for his cruelty, but even by his standards this siege was particularly vicious. Sir called his sensor operator, a nervous young Zephyrian named Vextal. I'm detecting something strange on the long-range scanners. Krexter didn't look away from the planet. Below, another crystal farm had just exploded in a shower of blue sparks. Beautiful. Define strange, Lieutenant. There's something coming in from the galactic rim, sir. The signature is, well, it's like nothing I've ever seen. Now Krexter turned around. The galactic rim was the edge of known space where stars grew thin and eventually disappeared into the great dark. No one lived out there. No one could live out there. The radiation levels alone would kill most species in hours. Probably just a rogue asteroid, Krexter said with a wave of his massive hand, or debris from some ancient battle. No, sir, it's definitely artificial. And it's big, really big. It's also moving faster than anything should be able to move in normal space. Krexter frowned and walked over to the sensor station. The readings made no sense. The object was indeed massive, at least 2 kilometers long, but its energy signature was unlike anything the Zephyrian military database. More strange, it seemed to be using some kind of propulsion system that didn't match any known technology. Distance and arrival time. At current speed, it will reach the edge of the system in approximately 6 hours, sir. Hail all frequencies. Demand identification. The communications officer tried for several minutes, then shook his head. No response, sir. Whatever it is, it's not talking. Krexter stared at the readings. In his 20 years of military service, he had conquered dozens of worlds and faced every major military power in the galaxy. He knew every ship class, every weapon system, every defensive technology that existed. This thing matched none of them. Continue monitoring. Alert me if anything changes. 6 hours later, the mysterious object reached the edge of the Cathar system. That's when things became truly frightening. Sir, the sensor operator's voice was high with panic. The object it just appeared. 1 second it was still outside the system, the next second it was right at the edge. That's impossible, Krexter snarled. Nothing can move that fast. Sir, I'm reading the data correctly. It covered the distance between the Outer sensor buoy and the system edge in 0.3 seconds. That's faster than light speed in normal space. Krextor felt a chill run down his spine. Faster than light in normal space was theoretically impossible. It violated every law of physics that governed space travel, yet here was something doing exactly that. Visual contact. The main screen changed to show the object. Krextor's breath caught in his throat. It was indeed a ship, but unlike any ship he had ever seen, where most vessels were smooth and curved. This one was angular and aggressive. It looked like it had been designed not just for war, but for winning wars quickly and brutally. The hull was dark gray, almost black, with lines of blue light running along its surface. The front end came to a sharp point, while the back spread out into what looked like massive engine arrays. Strange structures jutted from the side, like weapons that belonged in a nightmare. Energy readings, sir. They're off the scale, Admiral. Whatever powers that thing, it's producing more energy than our entire fleet combined. Before Krextor could respond, every communication device on the bridge came to life at once. The voice that emerged was calm, clear, and speaking perfect galactic standard. Zephyrian vessels, this is an official warning. You will cease your blockade of this system immediately and withdraw all forces. You have 30 minutes to comply. Krextor's massive jaw dropped open. The voice was confident, almost casual, as if the speaker was asking about the weather. There was no fear, no uncertainty, just a simple statement of fact. Communications, open a channel. Channel open, sir. Krextor stepped forward, drawing himself up to his full height. Unknown vessel, you are interfering with a legal military operation of the Zephyrian Dominion. Identify yourself immediately or be destroyed. The response came back almost instantly. Legal, starving civilians and bombing non-military targets. Interesting definition of legal, I said. Identify yourself. There was a pause. Then the voice came back, and now there was something cold and dangerous in it. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth ship Retribution. We received a distress call from this system. We're here to help. The bridge fell silent. Krextor stared at the screen, his mind struggling to process what he had just heard. Earth, did you say? Earth. That's correct. Impossible. Humans went extinct 500 years ago. Everyone knows that. Reports of our extinction have been greatly exaggerated, Admiral. Now about that withdrawal, you have 27 minutes remaining. Krextor felt anger beginning to override his confusion. Even if this was somehow a human ship, humans had been primitive when they disappeared. Their technology had been barely above stone tools compared to modern galactic standards. One ship, no matter how big, could not threaten an entire Zephyrian battle fleet. Human, you are either insane or suicidal. I have 47 ships under my command, including 3 heavy battle cruisers. You have 1 ship. Do the math. We did. The math says this is going to hurt you a lot more than it hurts us. Then you've chosen death. All ships target the human vessel. Prepare to. The human captain's voice cut through his order. Admiral, before you do something you'll regret, you should know that we're not alone. Fleet Command, this is Retribution. Please announce your presence. Suddenly, the long-range sensors went Crazy, ship after ship began appearing. At the edge of the system, each one materializing out of nothing, just like the first one had. Within minutes, the sensors showed dozens of vessels, all similar in design to the Retribution but varying in size. Some were smaller, fast-looking ships that seemed designed for hunting. Others were massive, even larger than the Retribution, with weapon arrays that looked like they could crack planets. And still more kept appearing. How many? Krextor whispered, Sir, I count over 200 ships, and more are still arriving. Krextor sank into his command chair. In all his years of conquest, he had never seen a fleet this large. Even the combined forces of the Galactic Council didn't field this many ships in one place. But it wasn't just the numbers that terrified him. It was the technology. These ships moved through space like they owned it, appearing and disappearing at will. Their energy signatures were completely beyond anything he understood. Admiral, the human captain's voice came again. Still calm, still confident, you now have 15 minutes to withdraw. After that, we stop asking nicely. Krextor looked around his bridge. His officers were staring at the sensor readings with expressions of pure terror. His weapons officer was shaking. His navigation officer had gone pale green. They all knew what he knew. They weren't looking at a rescue mission anymore. They were looking at the return of a species that the galaxy had tried to erase, a species that had just demonstrated they had not only survived, but had grown into something far more powerful than anyone had imagined. And they were angry. Sir, his communications officer asked quietly, what are your orders? Krextor stared at the human fleet on his screen. 200 ships and counting, technology that made his own forces look like children with toys, and somewhere in that fleet, humans who remembered what the galaxy had tried to do to them 500 years ago. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Krextor was afraid. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the Zephyrian fleet through the main viewer. Around her, the bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. They were all professionals, but she could feel the tension in the air. This was the moment they had been preparing for their entire lives. Captain called her first officer, Commander James Chen. All fleet units report ready. We have 237 ships in formation. Good. Time remaining on our ultimatum. 12 minutes, Captain. Elena nodded and activated her personal log. This was a moment that would be remembered for centuries, and she wanted the record to be clear. Captain's log, stardate 2547.3. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Ship Retribution. After 500 years of exile, humanity has returned to known space. We are here in response to distress call from the planet Cathara, whose people are being systematically murdered by the Zephyrian Dominion. She paused, looking out at the stars. I think it's time the galaxy learned what really happened to us all those years ago. The story began 5 centuries earlier, when humanity first developed faster than light travel and discovered they were not alone in the universe. The early contact with alien civilizations had been exciting at first. Humans were eager to learn to trade, to find their place among the stars. But that excitement quickly turned to fear on the alien side. humans learned too fast, they adapted too quickly. Within 50 years of first contact, human technology was advancing at a rate that terrified the established galactic powers. The Alterian Council had been the first to express concern. Humans, they said, were too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous to be allowed free access to galactic civilization. The Rigel Federation agreed, so did the Centauri Alliance, even the peaceful Andromedans, who rarely took sides. Galactic politics admitted that humanity made them nervous. It wasn't that humans were evil. It was that they were different, where other species took centuries to develop new technologies, humans did it in decades, where other species were content to stay within their established territories. Humans wanted to explore everything, where other species accepted limitations. Humans asked why not. The final straw came when human scientists began experimenting with dimensional manipulation technology. The alien powers decided that humanity had become too dangerous to ignore. The war that followed was brief but devastating, not because the aliens were particularly good at fighting, but because there were so many of them. Hundreds of species, thousands of worlds, millions of ships, all united by their fear of what humanity might become. Earth fell after 6 months of siege. The human colonies were overrun one by one, but the alien coalition made a crucial mistake. Instead of simply destroying humanity, they decided to be merciful. They would exile the humans beyond the galactic rim, to the empty spaces where no civilized species could survive. Let them die slowly in the dark, the Alterian Council had declared. Let them learn the price of thinking themselves above their betters. 2 million humans were loaded onto hastily built colony ships and sent into exile. The galaxy watched them disappear into the void and assumed that was the end of the human problem. They were wrong. Elena walked over to the navigation station, where Lieutenant Sarah Kim was monitoring the positioning of the fleet. Sarah, your family was on the third wave of colony ships, wasn't it? Yes, Captain. The UES New Horizon. My great-great-grandmother used to tell stories about the early years in the void. Those early years had been terrible. The colony ships were overcrowded and undersupplied. Many humans died in the first decade, victims of disease, accidents, and simple despair. But the survivors learned to adapt. They had to. The region beyond the galactic rim was not empty as the aliens had believed. It was filled with strange energies, exotic matter, and physical laws that worked differently than in normal space. Most species would have died immediately upon entering such an environment. But humans were stubborn. Instead of dying, they learned to work with the strange physics of the void. They discovered how to manipulate dark matter streams for propulsion. They learned to harvest zero-point energy from quantum fluctuations. They found ways to travel through dimensions that other species didn't even know existed. Most importantly, they never forgot why they were there. Engineering report, Mr. Rodriguez. Elena called to her chief engineer. All systems green, Captain. The quantum tunneling drives are operating at peak efficiency. The dimensional phase cannons are charged and ready. Oh, and Captain, the new gravity bombs are performing beautifully in test runs. Elena smiled grimly. The gravity bombs were her personal favorite among humanity's new weapons. They created small but incredibly dense gravitational fields that could crush a starship like an aluminum can. The alien powers who had exiled humanity had never seen anything like them because they were impossible to create using normal space physics. But humans no longer lived in normal space. Captain called her communications. Officer, we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Krextor. He's demanding to speak with you directly. Put him on screen. The ugly face of the Zephyrian admiral appeared on the main viewer. He looked nervous, which pleased Alina immensely. Human captain, I don't know what kind of trick you're pulling, but no trick. Admiral, just 500 years of humans doing what humans do best, which is surviving, learning, getting better. Alina leaned forward in her captain's chair. You see, Admiral, your people made a mistake when they helped exile us. You thought you were getting rid of a problem. Instead, you were giving us 5 centuries to grow up. Impossible. The region beyond the rim is uninhabitable. Nothing can survive there. Nothing alien can survive there, Alina corrected. Humans, as it turns out, are remarkably good at living in places where we're not supposed to exist. Behind her, Commander Chen reported quietly. Captain, long-range sensors show the Zephyrian fleet is powering up weapons. Alina nodded. She had expected this. The Zephyrians were bullies, and bullies always chose violence when they felt threatened. Admiral Krextor, I'm going to give you some free education about humanity. Lesson 1, we don't forget our friends. Lesson 2, we really don't forget our enemies. Lesson 3, we have very long memories. Your threats don't frighten me, human. They should. You see, we've been monitoring galactic communications for decades. We know what species participated in our exile. We know which governments voted for our destruction. We know which military officers led the attacks on our colonies. Alina's voice grew colder. We have a list, Admiral. Your name is on it. Krextor's face went pale green. You're lying. Admiral Krextor of the 3rd Zephyrian Battle Fleet, present at the siege of New Tokyo, personally responsible for the destruction of the civilian transport UES Hope, killing 8,000 human refugees, including 3,000 children. Alina's eyes were like ice. Did I get that right? The Zephyrian admiral's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. He had clearly never expected his old war crimes to catch up with him. But here's the thing, Admiral. Alina continued, we didn't come back for revenge. We came back because we heard someone crying for help. The Vilthari down on that planet. They're innocent. They had nothing to do with our exile. They're just people trying to live their lives in peace. She stood up and every human on the bridge stood with her, and if there's one thing that hasn't changed about humanity in 500 years, it's this. We don't let bullies hurt innocent people. Not when we can stop it. Captain, her weapons officer reported. The Zephyrian fleet is moving into attack formation. Alina looked at the tactical display. 47 enemy ships against her fleet of over 200, but it wasn't really about numbers. It was about sending a message to the galaxy. All ships, this is Captain Vasquez. The Zephyrians have made their choice. Show them what 500 years of human engineering Looks like rules of engagement are simple: protect the innocent, stop the bullies, make sure the galaxy remembers this day. She turned back to the screen where Admiral Krextor was barking orders to his fleet. Admiral, you have 30 seconds to surrender. After that we stop being polite. Never all ships attack. Destroy the human. Alina cut the transmission and turned to her weapons officer, Lieutenant Park. You may fire when ready. Aye, Captain. Weapons free. The battle was about to begin, and the galaxy was about to learn that killing humanity had been impossible, but making humanity angry, that had been the biggest mistake in galactic history. The first shot came from the Zephyrian heavy cruiser Dominator. A massive plasma beam that could have cut through a mountain struck the UES Retribution directly amidships. For a moment, the human ship was surrounded by a ball of superheated gas that glowed like a small star. When the energy cleared, the Retribution was completely undamaged. Adaptive shielding is working perfectly, Captain, reported Lieutenant Park from the weapons station. Their plasma had no effect at all. Admiral Krextor stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The Dominator's main cannon could destroy most ships with a single shot. Yet the human vessel had absorbed the blast as if it were nothing more than a gentle breeze. Impossible, he whispered. All ships concentrate fire on the lead human vessel. Maximum power. 47 Zephyrian ships opened fire at once. The space around the Retribution lit up with plasma beams, photon torpedoes, and particle cannons. The combined firepower was enough to sterilize a small planet. When the light faded, the human ship was still there, still undamaged, still waiting. Captain Vasquez to Admiral Krextor. Alina's voice came over the communications channel, calm and almost amused. That was quite impressive. Our turn now. The Retribution moved. It didn't accelerate in the normal sense. One moment it was floating in space. The next moment it was somehow folding space around itself, sliding through dimensions that shouldn't have existed. To the Zephyrian sensors, it looked like the ship was in 6 different places at once. What's it doing? Krextor screamed at his sensor operator. I don't know, sir. It's phasing in and out of normal space. Our targeting computers can't lock onto it. The Retribution reappeared directly above the Zephyrian formation. At this range, the human ship looked even more frightening. Its hull was covered with weapon systems that the Zephyrians didn't recognize. Strange pods and arrays that hummed with barely contained energy. Dimensional phase cannon fire. Alina ordered quietly. A beam of pure silver light lanced down from the Retribution. It passed through the shields of the Zephyrian destroyer, merciless as if they didn't exist, and struck the ship's hull. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the destroyer simply came apart. Not in an explosion, but as if every molecule in the ship had suddenly forgotten how to stick to every other molecule. The entire vessel dissolved into component atoms that scattered like glitter in space. By the void, Krextor breathed. What kind of weapon was that? His answer came from Captain Vasquez. Phase-shifted exotic matter beam. It disrupts the strong nuclear force that holds matter together. We developed it about 50 years ago. Would you like to see what we invented? Last week. Before Krextor could respond, the rest of the human fleet moved into action, and what they did next made the destruction of the merciless looked gentle. By comparison, the smaller human ships, the ones that looked like hunters, released clouds of tiny objects that moved like living things. These nano-swarm missiles spread out across the battlefield, each one no bigger than a grain of sand, but packed with adaptive AI and molecular disassemblers. The swarms reached the Zephyrian ships and began to feed. They consumed hull plating, turned armor into dust, and dissolved weapon systems from the inside out. Within minutes, 3 Zephyrian cruisers were reduced to skeletal frameworks that could no longer maintain life support. Shields, raise shields, crack store. Screamed, "They're not working, sir. The swarms are somehow passing through our shield frequencies. Because your shields are designed to stop energy and projectiles," Alina's voice explained pleasantly over the communications channel. "Our nano-swarms exist partially in folded space. They're technically not in the same dimension as your shields." Meanwhile, the larger human ships were demonstrating weapons that were even more terrifying. One of them, a massive dreadnought called the UES Vengeance, released what looked like a black sphere, about the size of a basketball. The sphere drifted toward a cluster of Zephyrian ships moving slowly and seemingly harmless. When it reached the center of the formation, it activated. Gravity went insane. The sphere became a miniature black hole, but one that was somehow controlled and directed. Instead of pulling everything toward its center, it created a gravity gradient that stretched in specific directions. Zephyrian ships caught in its field were pulled apart like taffy. Their hulls stretched and twisted until they snapped. 3 heavy cruisers died in as many seconds, crushed by forces that no normal ship could withstand. Controlled gravitational anomaly, Alina reported helpfully. "We learned to make them by studying the physics near the galactic rim. Amazing what you can do when you're not limited by normal space-time restrictions." Krextor's fleet was falling apart. Around him, ships that had taken decades to build were being destroyed faster than he could count them. His weapons were useless, his shields were worthless, and his enemies were using technology that made his own forces look like primitives with stone axes. "Sir," his communications officer called out, voice high with panic, "I'm detecting more human ships entering the system." "More? How many more?" "Dozens, sir. They're coming in from multiple vectors, different classes, different sizes. Sir, I think this is just the advance force." Alina's voice came over the channel again. "Oh, you noticed our friends arriving?" "Yes, Admiral, this is just the beginning. We've been building ships for 500 years. Would you like to know how many we have?" "Now how many?" Krextor whispered. "Enough, more than enough." The new arrivals were even more advanced than the first wave. Ships that seemed to be made of living metal that changed shape as they moved, vessels that existed partially in other dimensions, appearing solid one moment and ghostly the next. A few that seemed to be made entirely of energy, with no physical hull at all. One of the newcomers, a sleek vessel that looked like it was carved from a single piece of obsidian, moved toward the Zephyrian command ship. As it approached, Krextor could see that its hull was covered with symbols that hurt to look at directly. "Admiral," came a new voice over the communications channel. This one was different from Captain and Vasquez. Older, colder, with an accent that suggested vast age and patience. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the UES. Inevitable, I believe you knew my grandfather. Craig Storr felt his blood turn to ice. Chen, Admiral Marcus Chen. The same. He was at the defense of New Sydney when your grandfather led the assault. 12 million human civilians died in that attack. That was war. Yes, it was, and this is justice. The inevitable fired a single shot, not a beam or projectile, but something that looked like a ripple. In space itself, the ripple washed over the Zephyrian command ship, and for a moment nothing seemed to happen. Then Craig Storr realized that his ship was aging. The hull plating was developing rust and corrosion at an accelerated rate. Electronic systems began failing as their components aged decades in seconds. Even the crew began to feel the effects, their movements becoming slower and more labored. Temporal acceleration field. Admiral Chen explained, everything in the affected area experiences time at roughly 1,000 times normal rate. Your ship is now aging 1 year for every minute that passes. I estimate you have about 10 minutes before total system failure. Craig Storr looked around his bridge. His officers were already showing gray hair and wrinkles. The control panels were covered with corrosion. The life support systems were failing as their components aged beyond usefulness. And stop, he screamed. We surrender. We surrender. The aging effect ceased. Immediately, Craig Storr looked at his hands, which now appeared to be those of a much older Zephyrian. Around him, his bridge crew looked confused and elderly. Captain Vasquez, Admiral Chen's voice came over the channel. The enemy commander wishes to surrender, I heard. Elena replied, Admiral Craig Storr, you now have a choice. You can withdraw your remaining ships from this system and return to Zephyrian space. Your crews will be allowed to live, though they'll need some medical attention for the temporal effects. And if we refuse, Elena's voice became Arctic. Then we finish what you started 500 years ago. But this time we'll be the ones doing the finishing. Craig Storr looked at his tactical display. Of his original 47 ships, only 18 remained operational. The human fleet had grown to over 300 vessels, with more arriving every few minutes. His weapons couldn't penetrate their defenses. His shields couldn't stop their attacks. And they had technology that violated everything he thought he knew about physics. It wasn't a battle anymore. It was a demonstration, a message being sent to the entire galaxy. We withdraw, he said finally. Excellent choice. You have 1 hour to collect your survivors and leave the system. If we detect any Zephyrian ships in this region after that deadline, we'll assume you've changed your mind about surrendering. As the broken remains of the Zephyrian fleet began limping toward the system's edge, Elena turned to her communications officer. Lieutenant Martinez, open a channel on all galactic frequencies. It's time the galaxy heard from humanity again. Channel open, Captain. Elena looked into the camera that would broadcast her image across hundreds of worlds. Citizens of the galaxy, this is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Fleet. I want it known that humanity has returned to known space. She paused, letting that sink in. We know that many of you believed we were extinct. We know that some of you hoped we were extinct. But we survived. We adapted. We grew stronger. The silence after the battle was almost as shocking as the violence that had preceded it. On the surface of Keth Ara, Commander Sith all stood at his window and watched the last of the Zephyrian ships disappear into hyperspace, where there had been 47 enemy vessels. Just hours before, now there were only 18 limping wrecks fleeing for their lives. Above his world, the human fleet maintained its protective formation. 300 ships of impossible design, their hulls gleaming with technologies that seemed more like magic than science, and they were here to help. Commander Lieutenant Keth Ammer called. From across the room, we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. Sith All's crystal formations flickered with exhaustion and disbelief. Put it through. The screen filled with the image of a human woman in a dark blue uniform. She had short brown hair and kind eyes, but there was something about her that suggested she could be very dangerous when she needed to be. Commander Sith All of the Velthari Defense Force. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Ship Retribution. We received your distress call. Sorry it took us a few days to get here. Sith All stared at the screen. A few days? They had traveled from beyond the galactic rim in a few days, Captain Vasquez. How did you? Elena smiled, and her entire face transformed. The dangerous edge disappeared, replaced by genuine warmth. How did we get here so fast? Let's just say we've learned some new tricks in the last 500 years. The important thing is that you and your people are safe now. Safe? Sith All repeated the word like he was tasting something he'd forgotten existed. Yes, I thank you for coming. Don't thank us yet, Commander. People need medical attention and supplies. We're going to take care of that right now. As if summoned by her words, dozens of smaller ships detached from the human fleet and began descending toward Keth Ara's surface. They were sleek, graceful vessels that moved through the atmosphere like they were swimming through water rather than flying. Captain, how did you know we needed medical supplies? We scanned your planet. When we arrived, your people are suffering from malnutrition and stress-related illness. Your children in particular are in bad shape. Don't worry, we brought everything you need. The first human ship landed in the plaza outside the defense center with barely a whisper of sound. As Sith All watched through his window, a ramp extended from the vessel's side and humans began emerging. They were smaller than he had expected and more varied. Some were tall, some short, some dark-skinned, some light. They moved with purpose and efficiency, but also with something that the Velthari had almost forgotten existed. Hope. Commander, came a voice from behind him. Sith All turned to see a human standing in his doorway. The newcomer was a woman with gray hair and gentle hands, wearing some kind of medical uniform. I'm Dr. Sarah Kim, she said in accented but clear Velthari. I'm here to help your people. May I come in? Sith All's crystal formations brightened with surprise. You speak our language. We've been monitoring galactic communications for a long time. We know about your people, your culture, your medical needs. We came prepared. Dr. Kim entered the room, followed by several other humans carrying strange but obviously advanced medical equipment. Commander, we've brought enough food to feed your entire population for 6 months. We have medical supplies specifically designed for Velthari physiology, and we have growth stimulators for your children's crystal formations. growth stimulators. But those are theoretical. Our own doctors said they were impossible to create. Dr. Kim smiled. They are impossible using normal galactic technology, but we don't use normal galactic technology anymore. Outside, more ships were landing. Humans were spreading out across the city, setting up medical stations and distributing food, but they weren't acting like conquerors or even like the typical galactic aid workers who usually demanded payment or political concessions in exchange for help. They were acting like neighbors helping neighbors. Captain Vasquez Sith All said to the screen, I must ask, what do you want in return for this assistance? Elena looked puzzled. Want in return? Commander, we don't want anything. You called for help, we came to help, that's how it works. But surely there must be some price, some political arrangement, some trade agreement, some. Commander, Elena interrupted gently. Let me tell you something about humanity. 500 years ago, the galaxy tried to kill us because they thought we were too dangerous. They were afraid of what we might become. She looked out at something beyond the camera's view, and her expression grew thoughtful. They were right to be afraid. We did become dangerous. We became very dangerous indeed. Sithel felt a chill run through his crystal structure. But not in the way they expected, Elena continued. We became dangerous to bullies, dangerous to tyrants, dangerous to anyone who thinks that the strong have the right to prey on the weak. Her eyes returned to the camera, and they were blazing with conviction. The galaxy taught us that we were alone, that no one would help us when we needed it most. They tried to make us hard and cruel and selfish. She smiled again, and it was like watching the sunrise. They failed. We're still human, and humans help people who need help. That's what we do. That's what we've always done. That's what we'll always do. On the planet's surface, Velthari children were laughing for the first time in months as human doctors treated their crystal formations. Adults who had been barely surviving were receiving nutritious food and clean water. The dying crystal gardens were being tended by human botanists who had somehow learned Velthari agricultural techniques. Captain, Sithel said quietly, the galaxy will not like this. They will not like knowing that humanity has returned. I'm sure they won't. We've already started receiving some very angry messages from various governments. The Altarian Council is demanding explanations. The Rigel Federation is calling for emergency sessions. Zephyrian Dominion is probably figuring out how to spin this as a terrorist attack. Elena's expression grew harder. But here's the thing, Commander, we don't care what they like anymore. We've spent 500 years learning to survive without their approval. We can certainly manage to help people without it, and if they try to stop you, then they'll learn the same lesson Admiral Krexter just learned. We're not the same species that got exiled 5 centuries ago. We're stronger now, much stronger. As if to emphasize her point, more ships began appearing at the edge of the system, dozens of them, then hundreds. The human fleet was growing larger by the hour as vessels arrived from the depths of space where humanity had built its new civilization. Commander, Elena said, we're going to stay here for a few weeks to make sure your people recover completely. After that, we'll be moving on. There are other worlds that need help. Other species that are suffering. You're going to help them too, of course, that's why we came back. Sithel looked out at his city, where Velthari and humans were working together to rebuild what the Zephyrians had destroyed. Children who had been dying just days before were now playing in the streets. Adults who had given up hope were now planning for the future. Captain Vasquez, may I ask you something? Personal, of course. Why risk everything to help people you don't even know? Elena was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but firm. Because someone has to. Because the universe is a big, dark, lonely place, and if we don't take care of each other, who will? She leaned forward slightly. Commander, 500 years ago, the galaxy taught us that asking for help is useless, that no one will come when you call, that the only person you can count on is yourself. Her eyes blazed with fierce determination. We're here to prove them wrong. We're here to show the galaxy that there are still people who will answer a cry for help, no matter how far it travels through the void. Outside, the twin suns of Cathera were setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of blue and purple. But for the first time in months, the darkness didn't bring fear. It brought rest and hope, and the knowledge that they were no longer alone. Captain Sithel said, when you leave here, how will other worlds know to call you? How will they know that humanity is listening? Elena smiled, and it was a smile that promised that the galaxy was about to change in ways that no one could have imagined. Oh, don't worry about that, Commander. Word is going to spread very quickly. She gestured toward the growing fleet. Above them, every world we help, every bully we stop, every innocent life we save, it all sends the same message. Her voice carried across the void, broadcasting on frequencies that reach every corner of known space. Attention, galaxy. This is humanity. We're back. We're listening, and if you need help. The transmission echoed through space, bouncing off communication relays and spreading from system to system. Soon, every world in the galaxy would hear it. Every oppressed people, every suffering species, every innocent victim of tyranny and cruelty, just call. We'll come. And in the depths of space, in dark corners where hope had long since died, people began to believe again that maybe, just maybe, someone was listening, someone cared, someone would